This is the Millennials in Multifamily podcast, brought to you by Kronos Investment Partners. We interview industry experts to unlock key information that will help young professionals break into the multifamily world in order to create long-term and short-term wealth. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to iTunes and leave a rating and written review so we can reach more listeners.
Mike Woodfield, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Millennials and Multifamily podcast. So you are the asset manager at Obsidian Capital. Could you just go over what exactly is an asset manager?
So an asset manager really oversees the business plan of the property you bought. Everybody should have some sort of business plan that they need to go in and execute as they take down a property. A lot of people are good at acquisitions. They can manage that, and then they get to owning the property and don't know what to do. So an asset manager really should take your business plan and take it from when you close to when you sell. And you should have some metrics in there that you're trying to hit in your business plan to perform. You need to measure yourself, and what does success look like, and what did you promise to your investors? So really an asset manager directs all that traffic from when you close on the property to when you sell it.
And so how is an asset manager different from a property manager?
It's a great question. So maybe I'll go through a list of kind of responsibilities that an asset manager would have versus a property manager. And these are going to overlap a lot. It always overlaps, and it should overlap. I don't like to look at it as necessarily two separate jobs. You really have the same job. The job is to make sure you're seeing to the business plan and make sure you're hitting the goals of the owner. I'm getting my CPM designation right now, Certified Property Manager. So kind of diving on the property management side, getting to know that side a bit more as I own apartments myself. I need to know property management. And really what it comes down to, the thing they always go back to is the property manager, your goal is to meet the goals of the owner. So some things that asset managers do is they report to investors, they report to the owners, they'll analyze data that's given to them from the property management company, like financial reports, trailing 12, profit and loss, the balance sheet to make sure it's correct, make sure that the age payables aren't getting too high or the age receivables aren't getting too high. All of these things are vital to the success of the property. An asset manager might oversee a renovation if you're doing a renovation of the property. They may oversee some sort of capital event, whether that's a disposition or a refinance of a property. And they might assist in helping you get a cost segregation report done. They may queue up the distributions for the investors and send those to the accounting team to send out the checks. The day-to-day, a building catches on fire, they're probably going to call you first before the owners, right? So you're kind of that layer between ownership and property management. So those are kind of the basic duties of an asset manager. And I'll say this one line. This is your job. Your job is to increase the NOI. That's your job in any way you can. That is your job as an asset manager. Property managers, their day-to-day is on site. It's dealing with the residents and complaints and collecting rent. It's largely personal. They don't spend as much time looking at data. They spend more of their time helping upset people. And they also are meeting the owner's goals by what they do every day. So really their job is to be on site and to run that property like it's their own business. I like to look at property managers as the CEO of a multi-million-dollar organization. We've owned properties that were up to 650 units, and we sold them for millions and millions of dollars, $48 million. And there was one manager managing a $48 million asset. Go look at any business down the street and tell me which property or which business is worth $48 million down your street. There's not a lot of them that you can go and sell. There's just not. So if you don't have a sophisticated, smart, agile manager on your property, you're failing your property. It will not work.
So, okay, a lot of different avenues that we could go down right now. That was a very thorough description of what the difference between an asset manager and a property manager is. So I'm going to be a little bit selfish here. I'm a big numbers guy, and I know everyone talks about the profit and loss statement when they're analyzing multifamily properties and then when they're comparing their underwriting to the actual performance. But you mentioned the job of an asset manager is to also analyze the balance sheet. So
Sure.
what does the balance sheet of a multifamily property look like?
Well, you have debits and you have credits, and you have assets and liabilities, right? So some things that you want to look at to make sure they're doing is many times you have multiple bank accounts. You may have an operating account at the property level and then maybe an entity account that's controlled by ownership. You want to make sure that those are constantly being balanced. You may be drawing down monies from renovations that's held back by the lender. And you need to make sure that your property management company is aware of where everything is going because they're running the whole balance sheet. So you may find yourself in a situation where you've depleted all your money out of your renovation reserves, but on your balance sheet, it shows that you have $1 million in there. Well, that's just not true, right? So when you come to file a K-1 or something like that, at the end of the year, your accountant's going to have a lot of questions if your balance sheet's wrong. So it's not just about operations. There's a lot of accounting that goes into this, and if you don't have somewhat of an accounting background, you need to get one, or else you're going to get lost very quickly. So making sure that those bank balances make sense. If you have an owner distribution, making sure that that's recorded. You need to make sure that the owner contributions are recorded correctly. You just need to make sure everything's correct. So those types of things.
And then so you mentioned as an asset manager, your job is to analyze a lot of data, whereas the property manager doesn't do that so much.
Yeah.
So what type of data are you analyzing and what trends are you looking at?
So let me give you a breakdown of what I do every month, and maybe that'll help. I think that you have to find what works for you, how your mind works, and how you track things. I've found that tracking each lease for each property we own has helped me know exactly what's happening to the property every month. So on the 15th of every month, I go through and I pull up the new move-ins and the new renewals for the month, and I keep the track of them in an Excel spreadsheet. And what I do is I look at the person that just moved in versus the person that used to live in that unit, and the amount of money that we were charging net effective rent for both of them. And are we going up or are we going down? Are we staying the same, and why? Right? Mm-hmm. So if we're going down, that means that our rent revenue is going down, which means our NOI will go down. Well, I have to have an answer for that, right? Why is that happening? Why, property manager, are you charging less to this guy that just moved in when unit 101 was charging $800, you've charged $750? Why is that? So I look at that very closely, and it's very kind of painstaking work. It's a lot of data entry, but as you do the data entry, you learn what's happening, right? Rather than just saying, hey, will you pull me a report? Send me a rent roll, those types of things. You look at the rent roll, okay, now what? Mm-hmm. You see the occupancy is 93%. So what? if the occupancy is 93% this month and it was 93% last month, but your net effective rent dropped by 15 grand, well, that's the bigger issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I track the leases every month in a report. I also track where we're tracking on our underwriting. So in our office, we have David Tupin, who I know you guys have talked to, and he's kind of the finance guru. He takes the properties from idea, inception to close, and I help in the due diligence period, and then I take it from then on. Well, when David's underwriting, very smart guy, he thinks through everything. I have to go in and make sure we're tracking his underwriting to make sure we're hitting those numbers, right? Because that's what we promised our investors. So I go through and I track our income to make sure we're meeting our goals. So I also do that every month. Where are our rents compared to underwriting? And not just at a property level, but at a per unit level. So I also track the occupancy. We obviously look through the rent rolls every month and look for any red flags, whether that be a down unit that they had recorded for whatever reason. And I mean, that stuff like that pops up. There's a number of things that we look at there. Other than that, it's just looking through the financial statements and making sure you can make sense of everything that they've recorded in there. Expenses that jump off the page, income. The other thing I look at is other income every month. I think that you can put a little more effort into other income every month and it'll always grow. So I can give you an example of how data, looking at numbers, actually has helped me in the past. So when I first took over a property, we were doing a billing system, which is called RUBS. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Mm-hmm. But basically it's where we can take the utilities and we can bill them back to the property, to the residents. In Texas, we can charge up to, I believe, 90% of the total utilities back. Well, when we first got the property, I went through and I was looking through and I said, okay, we are doing RUBS, right? We are doing it. I can see that we're getting money on the P&L. I can see that we have utility income, let's call it was $3,000 or something for that month. Well, if you go in and you take the utilities and you take the amount you got and you divide it by the amount that you spent on utilities, we're only charging like 40%. That gave me an opportunity to increase the RUBS by 50%, right? Increasing our other income. So if I would have just been looking at that line item and saying, okay, check, we got it, mm-hmm. rather than diving in and saying, how much are we getting? And are we billing what the property can bear or what these residents will pay? Then I probably would have lost out on a lot of other income.
So Mike, you said something way in the beginning of what you were talking about a management team that may lease something for $50 less than what you thought when you're renewing, and you catch that. How do you handle when management teams do something like that? How long do you give them to kind of fix that problem? Because now they're locked in for a whole year at maybe under what you thought you were going to get.
This is just the honest truth. If you're not staying on top of it, it's going to happen all the time and every time. The thing I've learned about property management companies, and I love everybody that's in property management that's listening, but the thing I've learned about them is that, like most people in the world, we take the path of least resistance, right? Like a river, path of least resistance. And it's not because they're bad people. It's because they're busy. They're dealing with garbage in the parking lot that I got mad about last time I was there. And, this light went out and the lights are coming on during the day, and Mike gets pissed every time he's here and he sees the lights on and we're spending his money, all this, right? They're worried about all that stuff. so it's kind of hard to hold their feet to the fire all the time. But my point is that if you're consistent with them in your expectations, then they'll be consistent in their performance almost 100% of the time. So really, if you call them out one time, like, hey man, why'd you move this guy in $100 below what we had asked you to do? And they might have a reason, right? Like there might be a good reason. And them knowing that you caught that lets them know that you're not going to miss much. So I guess the answer to your question is it's consistency over time will get you results. And, I don't really have that issue too much anymore. Now, if they move someone at $25 under our pro forma, I'm not going to lose my mind. I mean, I'm just going to ask, hey, why'd you do that? And if they have a good answer, then let's move on. So I don't give them any time to fix the issue. I mean, once they've locked it in for a year, it's there, so we just have to ask questions and make sure it doesn't happen again unless they get permission or something like that.
So what I want to know is, since you're the one operating the properties, you probably have a good idea of what income and expenses should be. As an asset manager, how involved in the underwriting process are you?
That's a good question. So the way our organization operates is there's three partners. There's me, David, and Glenn. And Glenn is like the guru. He's been doing this for like 30 years, knows everything, every level of the industry. He's been doing it forever. David's the finance brain. I'm the operations brain. And so, we always are doing this. We're always kind of swinging in each other's lanes, not in a bad way, but, when it comes to due diligence, it's all hands on deck. When it comes to raising money, it's all hands on deck. Technically and typically what we do during due diligence and underwriting is David will kick over to me the underwriting once he feels like he's got it, right? And he'll say, hey, Mike, what do you think? Right? And then I'll go through and I'll look at the rents. That's the first thing I do is I look at the rents and say, is this achievable? Okay. I have to do a comp survey of some sort, a rent survey, and I go through and I look at the rents and analyze the rents. After that, I'll look at the operating expenses. If it's a 500 unit property and payroll is $20,000 a month, I know he's way off, right? Like that's too light. You're getting funny there. So, we kind of look at the operating expenses, and then I'll look at income and see, it always ties into the rents on his underwriting model, which you all should go buy his deal analyzer. It's awesome.
We have his deal analyzer. Yeah, it is good. Well,
it's great.
Yeah, plug the Dave Tupin right there.
Plug. And Glenn's book just went on sale. Maintenance Man, a Millionaire. I'm the only one not selling you anything. Okay. So, so I mean, at that point, I get involved in the underwriting. I never go into input stuff into underwriting. I leave that to David. He's like the wizard. And so Glenn or I will kind of go through and both of us, so we kind of have three sets of eyes collectively looking at the underwriting model before we even make an offer or submit an LOI. Once we get into due diligence, I kind of tend to take over on the operational side. So working with the property management on the unit walkthroughs, the lease audits, those types of things, interviewing the staff, setting those types of things up is generally what I would do. Working with the GC to do a renovations budget, nailing out a detailed budget with the property management. I'm renaming a property right now. So those are the types of things that I generally do.
Before you walk the property with the GC, are you helping with the estimated renovations in David's model?
So the way we do it is as soon as we know we're going to probably get a property under contract, I'll meet out there with the contractor. And David, me, Glenn, whoever, we'll go walk it with the contractor. plug Exodus Construction, Danny Sanchez. He's amazing. And we'll go walk with him, and he's just got an eye for things. I mean, he's done probably $20 to $30 million in renovation work for us over the years. So, I mean, he can go on a property as well as us, and he can look and see what we'll need to do and roughly guess how much it will cost. Then we plug in placeholders in the underwriting model, and then from there we get hard bids.
What do you mean by you plug placeholders in?
So like if you needed like a parking lot overlay, right? And it was a 50 unit property, my guess that would cost you about $60,000 for a 1.5 inch overlay. I just know that. I've done it before. So, it's experience, and you say, okay, look, maybe it's put 75 in there, and we'll just do a placeholder and see how the numbers work. And then we go get hard bids, and usually always the renovation's less than what we had estimated, right? So that's always the goal, is to go in a little high, be conservative, and then work down from there. But if the numbers work with a higher budget, then you know that once you start trimming that budget down, you're even in a better spot, right?
So when you're doing your renovations, how do you come up with your scope of work to make sure you're not over renovating the property?
So I think an over renovation would be what we do typically is we know our market really well. We do a lot of renovations in DFW. And so we kind of know what works and what areas, what works as far as the interior turns go. But, the other thing that you need to look at is capital expenditures that are going to eat up your cash flow in the future, right? So if your goal is to have a cash flowing asset, and then you don't budget enough to replace the HVAC units that are 20 years old, what's going to happen is you're going to pay for those out of your cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
So, it really depends on what the property needs. What we do is we look at what the property needs to be successful, and then we make an assessment whether that will work and if we can get the returns we need to get. So I guess we never really over renovate a property necessarily because we start with, this is what it needs. Let's work back from there. But if you start there and then you start cutting things out, like we don't have enough money to do the roofs, but if we leave that line item off, the numbers will work. You're going to screw yourself over, because in a year from now, you're going to have $30,000 in sheetrock repairs because you have roof leaks during the rainy season, or wherever you guys are. Maybe a snow season, you have snow sitting up there and it's going to be leaking through. You have water damage and mold, and now you got a bigger problem on your hands. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's typically how we look at things.
Well, yeah. So as a follow-on question, let's say we're looking at the roof and it's got 5 years of life left in it, so you're not going to renovate it right away.
Yeah.
Are you just going to raise some type of reserve account up front?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. I think it's prudent to raise a reserve account up front anyway. You never know. For example, in Texas, insurance has gotten so out of hand here with hurricanes and hailstorms and different things that have happened, that if you have a hailstorm that hits your property or a windstorm, they charge 1% of the property value as your deductible.
Ooh.
So if you have a $30 million property, I don't know, you said you're the numbers guy.
Yeah, $300,000.
There you go.
That's what I want.
So,
ooh.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, right? You're going to get new roofs, but you're going to spend $300,000 on the deductible to replace those roofs. Unless you have that money, it might hurt a little. So I would say you should always put in a rainy day fund or emergency fund. What better time than to have that than right now, right?
Yeah.
Dealing with COVID, it's the perfect time to have some sort of fund set aside that you can dip into for an event just like this. So
Okay, so another question I have is, as you're taking over a property,
Yeah.
a lot of times I hear, with these value adds, we're gonna improve the management and make the
Yeah.
management more efficient. What exactly does that mean? Is that cutting certain expenses or increasing income in certain areas besides just renovating units and raising rents?
Yeah. Um, it can mean a number of things. And there's a lot of different scenarios that we could go through and what that means. Typically, if you have bad management of the property, it means they have poor leadership um, or something like that. And so, if you're a good leader and you can step in as an owner and take control of things and demand a better performance, then you'll probably get a better result than that previous management company. So, um, I would say that it means that. It might also mean that the previous owner self-managed and he was kind of on his way out to retirement. He or she was on her way out to retirement and they got tired of dealing with the nonsense and so they stopped caring. Some owners run out of money and so their management company is left in a helpless position, not being able to turn units. So they go steal from other units, cannibalize units to get other units made ready. So it's not always the management company's fault that they're not performing well. It could be a number of things. It could be that they had a fire and the owner didn't want to spend the money to get it fixed,
Mhm.
right? Didn't want to pay the deductible or couldn't. And so now they're left with a property that only has 70% of the units available. And they can't cover anything but the debt service and the property taxes and the payroll, And I mean, there's a lot of reasons why a property management company underperforms. But I would say the biggest one is if you're not staying on top of them as an asset manager, they usually don't do so well.
And so when I'm looking at deals, a line I look at a lot is the payroll line item to make sure that they're not either employing too many people or employing too little people.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how do you decide to staff a property?
That's a great question. So when we buy a property, I generally speaking do not like to go in and fire everybody. I think that that's just, I mean, you don't have a soul if you do that, first of all. But no, I mean, really, I don't like to do that because these people have been there. They know where all the bodies are buried, right? And they know everything about the property. So if you go in and fire the maintenance guy that's been there for 20 years, I mean, he knows every HVAC unit that kind of rattles, but he knows just how to fix it. He's done every repair on there for 20 years. He knows everything. So if you just go in and fire him so you can save 13, or $3 an hour or $2 an hour, you might end up regretting that down the road. And generally speaking, whenever we made the decision to let go of a staff quickly into the takeover process, we regretted it. So I like to hold on to them. If they're just a non-performer, if they're just not good at their job, then we let go of them very quickly. But if they're willing to adapt and kind of go forward with attitude of, all right, this is the new owner and this is what they want, and they had to step it up, then we'll keep someone on forever. So as far as the number of people that are working there, which I think was your question, that's always tough because every property is different. If you have a property that has a lot of HVAC issues, you're going to need more people there. Because if you have one maintenance guy and one person in the leasing office and it's summertime and your HVACs are breaking down like crazy, well, who's going to do your make readies? Now you have a product issue. Now your occupancy is going to go down. Now your revenue is going to fall. And now you have vacancy loss, and you did it because you didn't want to hire somebody else. So you got to look at the trickle effect of that. So as far as your question, my answer is it's different every property. And you just have to be in tune with the property enough to know what it needs.
So it kind of sounds like you may keep the same management team in place, or do you just try and keep some of the workers in place? Because I know a lot of people tend to just switch management companies because they figure that's why it's not working.
Yeah, but I mean, the management company doesn't always have a place to put those people. When we generally always switch management companies when we buy a property. We have one or two that we work with, and we just move forward with them. But they'll offer the staff a job to stay there, and a lot of times they'll take it. If they leave, then they leave. And then generally what I like to do is I like to go back to other properties that we have sold, and see if we can get a manager I liked working with to come work for us. So I have a list of people in my brain that if that happens, I'm just going to call them and offer them a job. So, yeah, I mean, that's how I'd approach that.
And then so on the income side, when you're taking over a property,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the easiest, simplest ways you found to increase the income besides just renovating units and bumping rents?
Yeah, renovating units, bumping rents, of course, but a lot of times you just go through the rent roll and just see when these people moved in. You'll get a property, and like when people talk about value add, meat on the bone, these types of buzzwords that we use in our industry. If you go through a rent roll and you see that, Joe Schmo moved in 1993 and hasn't had a rental increase since then, well, that's your value add. You may not have to do anything to the unit. You just bring them up to market. It's what everybody else is paying, so you can do that. As far as the other income, the things that I thought have been creative that we've done in the past and things that we like to do, depending on what class of asset you're dealing with, which we deal with a lot of B asset class, B to B minus, somewhere in there. And, sometimes you have people that want to move in that may not qualify under your leasing standards. And so we'll charge what we call an opportunity fee, basically where, if their credit score doesn't meet the criteria, they pay a fee. And if they meet other criteria, it's not just you allow anybody in, but if they meet certain criteria, we'll let them come live at the property if they pay this opportunity fee. It's different than a rental deposit. Rent deposit sits on your balance sheet. You can't touch it. You can't spend it, right? It's a deposit. It's not income. It doesn't hit your balance. It doesn't hit your profit and loss statement, right? So that's another. I mean, depending on where you're at or what you would consider this risk of this tenant to skip or be evicted, you can charge a certain amount, and that's a good way to say, okay, we'll let you live here. We understand you have some blemishes on your credit, but also you get something besides the deposit in case they do skip out. You can cover a unit turn. The other thing is pet rent. Almost every property we've ever taken over, they charge something for pet rent. But if you go do an audit of the whole property, they're charging probably 10% of the total amount they should be charging. They're not keeping track of it as well. I mentioned to you the RUBS program, and making sure that you're gauging how much that property will bear. Another one that's come up recently is parking, and not parking in the traditional sense, but there's towing companies now to where they'll come in and they'll monitor the property every day. And if you're parked in a parking spot without a sticker, they'll tell you, but you can log in on your phone and you can pay like $3 to $5 a day to park in the property without a sticker. So, and they manage that all for you and just send you a check at the end of the month. So one of our properties that's 208 units, we got a check for like $800 last month for people just paying to park there. And that does two things. That keeps people out of your property that don't want to pay to park. And then also if they live there, but they're not on the lease, it forces them to go into the leasing office and say, hey, I live here. I don't want to get towed, and I don't want to pay you $5 a month or a day. And then you can increase what you charge on your utility billing, and there's other fees associated with more people be on the lease. So
Wait, so they have to pay $5 a day to park at the property if they don't live there?
if they're not on the lease,
Mhm.
yeah. So if you had a friend come over and stay, and they don't park in the guest parking lot, say there's like 4 or 5 spaces there, they park inside the property, they have to pay $3 to $5 a day to park there. Now, I don't know if I'd recommend doing that on every property. At this property, this is probably a C plus property. We had an issue with people being there that we didn't want there, that weren't residents. They were causing some trouble. This kept a lot of them out because they didn't want to get towed. So it's been great for the property, actually, other than just being another expense line item.
And you said
Income line item.
And you said there was an app for that?
Yeah, it's through the towing company. If you call a towing company and sign a contract with them, they'll come in and they'll restripe your parking lot, and put up new signs for you. So if you do that, or if you sign a contract with the laundry, which those are like 20 years long, locking you in forever, they'll come in and they'll renovate your laundromat and your laundry rooms, and they'll give you new laundry equipment if you re-sign a lease with them. So, little tip.
That's awesome. I wanted to go into that opportunity fee. What do you charge for the opportunity fee, and is it like a shorter lease to kind of give them a test run?
No, it's still a year lease. I mean, they're paying the same rent as anybody else, same fees. But if our qualification standard is a 650 credit score, and they come in at a 600, and they want to live there, we may say, well, you have to pay this $400 fee because it's a little bit of a risk on our end, right? Kind of like a cap rate assesses risk, right?
Right.
So does a credit score. That's really what it is it's us saying this is how risky this person is. Now, if you pay me $2,000, I'm not going to let someone with a felony live in the property. That's just a no-go, right? We're not going to do that. But if it's somebody that maybe fell on hard times or something like that, and they just have bad credit, we look at that objectively and say, okay, maybe it's the first month's rent that we hold as a deposit rather than the $400 deposit. That helps as well. But this opportunity fee, I think we charge like a flat $300 or $400.
Are you struggling to understand how to underwrite multifamily properties? Hi, I'm John Stober, and I completely understand your problem. I thought underwriting would come naturally to me due to my background in finance and accounting, but I quickly found out that there aren't a lot of resources that cover this subject. I had no idea whether what I was doing was right, wrong, or just original. I don't want you to have to pick up little nuggets here and there like I did. So I wrote an ebook called How to Analyze Big Apartment Buildings and Make Them Feel Small that puts together all the pieces of the puzzle. We're also giving away a deal analyzer with the ebook, and they're both completely free. Don't wait as long as I did to start chasing financial freedom. Go to bit.ly/underwriting ebook and get your free copy today. So you mentioned something earlier too on the rent roll. One of the easiest ways to add value is to just find the guy who's lived there for 20 years and hasn't had his rent increased. Yeah. When you're looking at a property though, what types of red flags are you looking for on the rent roll and the security deposits that tell you maybe this seller is trying to pull one over on us?
So that's a great question. The first thing that you should look at is your delinquency. Okay. If a seller has tenants, residents that have lived there and been delinquent for longer than 2 months, what he's doing is he's not moving people out. He's holding them on the rent roll, so his occupancy looks higher. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So a huge red flag would be high delinquency, right? And you go and you look in and you're like, okay, this guy's been delinquent for 4 months. Why haven't you evicted him? And you'll probably find that there's a lot of people like that. And the answer is, if you went and knocked on that door, that guy probably isn't there anymore. It's probably a vacant unit that they just haven't turned, but they don't want to turn it, and they want the occupancy to appear higher, so they keep them on the rent roll. Very bad practice, and I've caught people doing it before. So that's something you should even be watching for at your own property as well. And other things, red flags. So here's one that was kind of recent. If the property you're looking at is being sold as a 170 unit property, let's say, and on the rent roll it shows 160 units. Why could that be, right? Generally speaking, they pull units off that are down off the rent roll. So like if you had a fire or something like that, they would pull those units off the rent roll so it didn't affect the occupancy. So you need to start asking questions, what's going on with those units, right? And as you dive deeper into that, you'll probably find that they're down units, and you need to probably budget a bit more money or get a credit from the seller before you close on the property. So I would say those are huge red flags on a rent roll. Other than that, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
What are some red flags you see when you're doing your lease audit?
That's a good question. That's probably a better question for someone that does property management more, but things I've seen in the past are people that don't have true paperwork. There's not driver licenses attached to it or anything like that, or I don't know, just missing social securities, stuff like that, to where you're like, okay, they weren't qualifying people before they moved them in here. That's happened once before that I've seen. But generally speaking, if you're buying a property that needs help, they're going to have horrible leases, and it's going to be a lot of cleanup for the property management company coming in.
So as a syndicator, if you're running into a property though where there is high delinquency, or maybe there are an additional 10 down units, doesn't that represent opportunity to increase the value?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think of a down unit. What's it doing for anybody?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. It's losing thousands and thousands of dollars just sitting there, and it can be down for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. We've seen units that have been down for 10. Think of how much vacancy loss ran through that unit in 10 years. So we see extreme value add potential in a property with down units, or someone that's been living there for a long time, because we just go in, we spend the money, get the unit up and going to where it's in perfect living condition. It's actually probably going to look pretty nice, and you rent it out, and you don't have the vacancy loss anymore. So it's a good return on your investment to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I wanted to go back to something you said at the beginning when you were talking about your organizational structure. You said at Obsidian, you, David, and Glenn are all partners.
Yeah.
I've seen different organizations where they hire on their asset managers, so I guess they're not partners. What's typical in the industry? Are asset managers typically invested in the property, or are they just hired on?
That's a great question. So I'll give you a little bit more of my background. So Glenn Gonzalez hired me about 4 years ago, I think. I have a background in startups and running companies and turnaround felling companies, and that was kind of where I got started after college. Known Glenn for about 8 years, and he offered me a job 4 years ago. He and his previous business partner were running a portfolio, and I was their asset manager on that portfolio. And that's really where I got most of my experience from, was from that portfolio. Glenn is like a master at doing this stuff, and I worked side by side with him in the operational side for years and years, and so I got a lot of good training from him. And so, you know, it typically you would just hire an asset manager. But if you only own like one or two properties, just do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, you know, I met somebody recently. I get hit up quite often to coach people on asset management because there's just not a lot of people out there that know how to do it, and there's just not a lot of people that are very good at it. There's a lot of people that can underwrite deals, not a lot that are very good at it, but can underwrite deals and can get them to close, right? They can buy properties, they can raise money. But when it comes to executing the business plan or actually running the property, they struggle. So, you know, I got recently asked to help somebody with asset management as kind of as a third party. And it didn't work out, but, you know, they had essentially run the property into the ground. They had no interest in asset management. They only wanted to raise money and buy properties. And when you develop that attitude of, I just want to buy properties and raise money, you really lose sight of the fact that you actually are buying a business and you need to run it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen that a lot in the past. So I would say you need to be your own asset manager, which basically means you're just running your own business. And then as you learn and as you get the experience, you should bring somebody on to do what you do, because then you'll be able to train them, you'll be able to teach them, right? If you can't walk the walk or talk the talk, if you talk the talk, you can't walk the walk, it doesn't mean anything, right? So I would say first be your own asset manager, then hire somebody after you acquire a certain amount of units and you have that experience yourself.
Chris, you say you had a question?
So with what's going on in the world today with COVID, how has that changed your management plan, or how have you adapted to what's going on in the climate now?
So I'm communicating with the properties a lot more often, like daily, just to make sure that they're, you know, being responsive, and I'm tracking collections every day. You know, what's our delinquent rent? What have we collected? How's that compared to last month, the month before? And as you track that, you kind of get a good idea of where you're at and how rough the next few months will be for you. So I think that has changed. We're not evicting people right now because we can't. The courts are closed. And if we need to go into a forbearance agreement with Fannie Mae, they don't allow you to evict anybody. We're also not charging late fees. We're doing some early rent payment drawings. So if people pay their rent early, we put them in a drawing for a TV or something like that. Kind of just, you know, if people have the money and want to pay the rent early, then, you know, they could win a TV. So that we collected more rent for April in the last 5 days of March than we have ever collected in those early rental collections. So the prepaids is what they call them. So we collected more prepaids, prepaid rent this month than we did the past 12 months because of that drawing. I feel like the managers are really focused on collections right now. And so we haven't seen too large of a hiccup in our collections on our properties, maybe a little bit of a variance. But But other than that, we're just in contact with them and then our investors to make sure that everybody's aware of what we're doing.
How is maintenance calls and stuff changed? Are you still making those?
So if it's an emergency, an HVAC unit goes down or something like that, or they don't have running water for whatever reason. But if a light bulb goes out or, these types of things, they're not going in units to do those types of things right now. So from a maintenance perspective, yes, it has changed.
All right, Mike. I think we're running close on time, so I wanted to get to our section that we lovingly call the Fast Five, which are the same 5 questions we ask every guest who comes on our show. So if you're ready, we'll jump right into it.
Let's do it.
So question number 1. If you had to start all over again and you were still in your early 20s, how would you do that?
If I could start all over again and I was in my early 20s, what would I do?
Mm-hmm.
I would probably try and get into the industry a little earlier. It's tough to say. I mean, I feel like all my experiences led to me to where I'm at now. I don't have any regrets. So I don't know if I would change anything. I probably would exercise a bit more. But other than that, I mean, I feel like I've lived a pretty good life and pretty happy with where I'm at now. So I probably would have bought more stock in like Amazon or something.
Yeah, wouldn't we all?
Yeah, right.
No regrets. How do you see young professionals adding the most value to experienced operators in this space?
So that's actually a fantastic question. My brother, he runs he's in startup mode. He's started up a software company, and like he's so passionate about it, and I was on a Zoom call with him and David and Glenn, and David and I totally understood what was going on. Glenn was kind of like, all right, whatever. Seems like you guys got it. The younger generation, they just understand how implementing technology can make processes so much more efficient, communication streamlined. Mm-hmm. And I think, the benefit that we get from especially partnering with David and Alex, who's in our office, is that, I mean, they've already thought, like when I think something's cool, they've already thought through like 10 other things when it comes to technology and how they can implement it. And so, I mean, I think that's the largest benefit we get from that, as well as social media. I'm not a huge social media guy. I actually don't even have a social media app on my phone. Because I think it's a waste of time. That's just my opinion. So I don't do social media, but we've gotten countless investors through David's Instagram, right? So, those types of avenues that I normally wouldn't think of, they've mastered and do a great job at.
Yeah, I know Dave is big on social media.
Yeah, for sure. He's good at it.
It's funny you say that. My mom's working from home, and I taught her how to do the split screen on Microsoft today, so she doesn't have to print it out and then look it up again. Saving trees.
I know how to do that, man. I can handle that.
Okay, so what's the biggest mistake you've made in your career, and how have you since adjusted your business?
Ooh, man, I've made a lot of mistakes. The biggest mistake I've made in my career. That's a tough question to answer. There's been a lot of failures since I got into this business, as far as like things that didn't go exactly how I wanted them to. There's these properties that we own down south of Houston, down in the Houston area. And it seemed like no matter what I did at those properties, they were destined to fail. And that was a huge learning lesson for me, that sometimes you just overpay, and sometimes you go in with the wrong business plan, and sometimes you don't execute that well. And that was one that I can look at and say, I gave it everything I had, but at the end of the day, I couldn't make it work, and that was tough for me. That one left some scars for sure. And so I think as far as regret or failure, that would definitely be the one that I think about, is that those two properties in that area that I couldn't get them to do what I wanted or needed them to do. So yeah, a lot of hours on those ones.
What ended up happening with those properties? Did you dispose of
So
them?
so those properties, the market completely fell out of the bottom of those properties. They're supported by chemical and oil, and construction crews that worked on those plants were the ones that lived at our properties. And after Hurricane Sandy, those construction crews just left. They went to other places in the world and they didn't come back. So we were left with a huge vacancy issue, which we lowered our rents and our lease qualification standards, and we brought in people that shouldn't have lived there. And then we had a huge delinquency issue. And then we had a huge issue with turning product because we had so many people skipping. It was problem after problem. It was like we fell out of the tree and hit every branch on the way down. And so I look back on those all as learning lessons. Those properties, actually, we are signing it's not my property. This one I just asset managed for Glenn, but they're signing the paperwork to sell it for next week. So I'm coming to a bitter end with those two properties. So, and not bitter end, it's done, but it was a very difficult journey to get here.
In there.
Yep. Sometimes you just got to know when to drop back and punt, right?
Sometimes you need to know when to drop back and punt, yes. But yeah, I don't know when to do that. So I'm like a dog after a bone sometimes. So anyways.
So what types of changes do you make though after something like that?
That's a great question. I think when you go in to buy a property, you pull the emotion out of it. Especially if you're a syndicator, you live off of fees and acquisition fees and these different things. Pull the emotion out of it and say, will this work? Is this a market that I'm familiar with? Why am I buying here? Why don't I go to a place I know will work? And if you can be honest with yourself, then you can probably, look down the road and be like, I made the best decision I thought I could at that point. And it was the right decision at that point. But don't over leverage yourself. Like you said, don't over renovate, right? And don't under renovate. Don't change your renovation budget to make your numbers work, because that'll get you in trouble every time. So, just be honest with yourself, and then it should work.
That's the best answer we've ever gotten to that question.
Right. Question 4. What's been your favorite way to incorporate technology and social media into your business? Kind of touched on that earlier.
I'm a huge fail on the social media end. I like LinkedIn, and I use that a lot. I don't know, man. I kind of keep my business and work life separate. As far as, like, if you look at my Instagram or whatever, you just see my kids and my wife and kind of that stuff, friends. As far as other technology, we've employed a few different platforms. We use one called Syndication Pro that helps us communicate with our investors, and it's a great resource when you're raising money and different things like that. And the one I was talking about today, my brother's company, is called Via Customers Software, and that just helps so we can actually text out information to our investor pool. So we're just kind of touching, email, phone calls, and text messages now. So I love technology and the way it works, beyond just being really organized in our Dropbox and different things like that. I mean, that's basically what we do. Social media, not so much. We do have some cool YouTube videos that we've done that are really, really good. But other than that, I haven't done too much. So
You're just using Dave and Alex for social.
Yeah, they're doing a good job.
Okay, and last question. What book or books have been most influential to you on your journey?
Dude, Maintenance Man to Millionaire, Glenn Gonzalez. I think, and there's so many books. Principles by Ray Dalio was a really, really good one. Oddly enough, and this is, how old are you guys?
26.
26. Okay, I'm a little older. I'm part of Little Wisdom. When I was 26, a guy gave me a book called The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey, and that changed the way I looked at personal finance. And incidentally, if you're not over leveraged in your personal life, you're probably doing pretty well in your business life as well. Kind of they go hand in hand. So that was probably one of the more influential books that I've ever read in my business life. Did you just ask for one?
Book or books?
You can give a whole bunch if you want.
So that Ray Dalio's Principles, Total Money Makeover, Dave Ramsey, and Never Split the Difference.
Yeah, I love that book.
Negotiations, just vital. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mm-hmm.
Us millennials need to know how to communicate with people. Some of us suck at it, and we don't like to pick up the phone and call.
We'll just text each other.
Guess what? People that have money that are invested in apartments want to talk to you on the phone. They're not on Snapchat.
Well, they're all old.
They're all old. They're doctors. They're lawyers. They're in their 60s. They're retiring, and you need to be able to communicate with them on an intelligent level in person, and not be scared to do that. Right. So those types of books have been very helpful for me in my business life.
Well, awesome, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Millennials and Multifamily Podcast. If you even want anyone to be able to reach out to you after this episode, what would be the best way for them to get in touch?
So they can just email me or call me. Either way, I don't care. My email is mikefloyd18@gmail.com. That's my personal email. And I'm happy to send anybody forms that I use. I don't really hold that as sacred information. It's not as robust as these underwriting models and stuff. And I'm happy to get on a phone call with anybody that needs help or whatever. Happy to pay it forward and help anybody or mentor anybody, because those types of people help me to get where I'm at. So that'd be a good way to reach me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and we greatly appreciate your time.
Thank
Sure.
you, Mike.
Nice to meet you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Millennials and Multifamily Podcast, brought to you by Kronos Investment Partners. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and a written review at iTunes so that we can connect with more people. Finally, head on over to kronosinvestmentpartners.com and sign up for our newsletter so you can stay updated on everything we're doing. If you're interested in partnering with us as we find new opportunities, you can also schedule a phone call with us under the Contact Us tab at kronosinvestmentpartners.com.